The Late Lunch has women from all walks of life sharing a snippet of their story, inspiring and empowering women to make a difference for the good of our world, indeed the world that God has made. Today's guest is Bridget White. Now, she started a drop-in centre for the homeless, but never expected to be in the very position of the people that she'd been helping. Her husband told her to leave their beautiful home, and she ended up sleeping rough. My very special guest on the Late Lunch today is Bridget. Hello, Bridget.
Hello.
Welcome, and thanks for journeying so long to be with us here at UCB.
It's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit. That's a beautiful accent. Tell us where you're from.
Ireland, County Westmeath.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Now, what happened? What's your story?
Well, I come from Ireland in the late 60s. We were a very large family and we'd suffered a lot of poverty in Ireland, and my father had an alcohol problem and he took us to England in the late 60s. And so from then on it was sort of work. And eventually I got married, had 3 children, and everything seemed to be okay. There were problems, but everything seemed to be okay. And then a few years ago, I've been a Christian for about 15 years or so, and suddenly I discovered that my husband at the time, he was not at all happy with me being a Christian. So he distanced himself from me and the idea that I am a Christian. And obviously from time to time I worked in the field of, Christian work.
Yes.
I helped set up in the Salvation Army the Candle Project 15 odd years ago, which is still going today.
Wonderful.
And eventually, with Simon, another Christian, we set up the Shepherd's Tent, and we set about taking people in off the street that were homeless, trying to reach drug addicts, alcoholics, and people that were out on the street. And so, again, I found myself homeless because my husband said, "You can't do this, I don't want to know about it, so go." So I found myself out in the street with nowhere to live, and went from different places to begin with, but suddenly all doors seemed to close. And so I found myself sort of sleeping in the outbuilding of the church I was working in, and it was really rough. The owner, Sally Jackson, was very good and gave me a mattress to sleep on. And so in the morning I'd get up and feed the homeless along with Simon. We worked together on it, and the other helpers that came in. And so they'd come in rough. Some were sleeping in old cars, some were sleeping on the street. And I was a bit rough myself because I'd been sleeping on the stage and it was quite cold.
Yes.
But it was a roof over my head. And as time went on, we reached out to the homeless and people that we met that were on drugs. And a young chap came in, and he was on the verge of losing his 2 legs, were being amputated because of heroin addiction and needling his legs at the time. So we prayed with him, and he kept coming in. Eventually he was baptised, and he started doing a bit of work around the church part of the Shepherd's Tent. We were in one building, there was a church next door, and so his legs started to heal, and he's still working. And
Praise
he's,
God. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it's really wonderful, because he's doing some work with animals out on a farm, which he loves doing. And so the work went on. It lasted 4.5 years. And
see, we talk about lives being changed with Jesus. What you're actually telling me is this really does happen.
It does happen, yes. Because in the time that we worked there, I think about 18 people, men, women and children, were baptised. And so we did see lives changing, and we were there to support them and help them. And sometimes they came in terrible state, to begin with. And their clothes, and but little by little we've seen improvements, and little by little, they picked up as there was somebody there to listen and talk to them. And it was a wonderful time for both Simon and I to be doing this work, and the helpers that came in. And so when it came to an end, we were really sad because we wanted to carry on. And in fact, the last day the Shepherd's Tent was opened, we put one man into bed and breakfast. He was a solicitor who had fallen in hard times. So from whatever walk of life you come, you don't know when it's going to happen. It can happen to anyone at any time. And so we were glad to have been there for the people at the time.
How from that story to today, and being in Bristol, and I know that you're involved with street evangelism in a very major way. What do you find yourself doing today, and how did you get to that point?
Well, we sort of go out because having met the people at Shepherd's Tent, we knew there's a lot of young people out there and they're pretty desperate. And we see them around the streets, they're binge drinking, and there's a lot of drugs around and a lot of promiscuous living. So we try to go out and reach them,
Yes.
and just be there to talk to them, knowing that maybe some of them will end up on the street like the ones that we worked with.
Yes.
And so we try to tell them in advance, you know, it's a down spiral, and this is a terrible place to end up, you know, when you keep on drinking. And recently I heard that quite a few of the young people have liver and kidney disease from binge drinking. And a doctor on television recently said that the casualty department he works in has so many young binge drinkers coming in, you know, and they're drunk and disorderly, and it's really dreadful, you know. He didn't train to be a doctor to sort of help people, you know, that were binge drinking. And so really I think it's time that as a nation we do need to pray for these young people, because they're really desperate. And as family life seems to have fallen apart, and God seems to be taken out of schools and everything, and the whole system of communication is breaking down for those young people. And so they're pretty desperate, and we need to pray. We really need to shake the gates of heaven for them, you know, because they're really desperate.
Now, you spent some considerable time in prayer today before you came in, and you believe that God has given you a scripture to share with us today over the airwaves. Would you like to do that now, Bridget?
Yes, I'd be glad to.
So you brought the Word of God in for us. Isn't that wonderful? That's a bonus for us, isn't it?
Yes, this is a word from Revelations 3:14. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witnesses, the origin of God's creation. I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold or hot, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing. You do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Therefore I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may be rich, and white robes to clothe you, and to keep the shame of your nakedness from being seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see. I reprove and discipline those whom I love. Be earnest, therefore, and repent. Listen, I am standing at the door knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to you and eat with you, and you with me. To the one who conquers I will give a place with me on my throne, just as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
That's a powerful word for the nations today, Bridget. How do you interpret that, with wrapping that up with your passion to reach those who are lost?
Well, there's a lot of prosperity around today, what people think is prosperity, and which is material things. You know, God says that in the end times we will live in perilous days, when there will be very little spiritual help around. And we're seeing some of this, I believe, on the streets with the young people binge drinking and in a really terrible state. So, you know, God is saying to come to him and to get his riches, which is not material things. And if we come to him, he will come in and sup with us, and he will help us, and he will be there for us. As I found myself when I was homeless and I got desperate at times, I was out of my comfort zone, and I didn't have much going for me in terms of worldly things, but yet I knew God was there, and that he was going to provide everything for me if I just hung on and trusted him. So really it's a call, I believe, for people to come and to really find out what prosperity means. You know, it's not material things, but it's God given us prosperity in the things that we do, whether it's work, looking after people. And so I think it's a call from God to really come together as a church and as a people, and to reach out to the needy and the poor, and to help those who are really desperate and that are out there and they're really desperate and they don't know what they need, but we do. So we go out in the name of Jesus to try and reach as many people as we can.
Now you're sitting before me, a vision of loveliness, it has to be said, in that beautiful pink jacket. But you've got a very, very bright fluorescent day glow jacket on. With what on the back? What is written on the back? Let me see. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. Explain to me what some of the reactions are that you get when you walk around, because you've got your satchel with all your handouts and your tracts that you're giving out.
That's right.
How do people react to you?
Well, we get a lot of young people on the streets, and they come up and they sort of ask questions and say,
excellent,
is he, does he have the answer? And so they follow us. We've gone out on the night time, and we've brought a loudspeaker out, and we've spoken to the youngsters in the
Get louder than them, eh, Bridget?
Well, we've shouted, come out of the pubs and clubs, to try and get them out and say, stop squandering your life, and come and hear the message. And they come over and they sort of come up against the car and they ask questions, and they're very genuine, a lot of them. They want to know what's going on, so we try and reach as many as we can when they're as sober as possible, because it gets really very dangerous late. We've had bottles broke behind our back, and we've had some abuse on the street quite a bit, and Simon's had, people closing their fists and getting angry and stuff, but we go out there in the hope we can reach some of them, and we really want to,
What drives you to do this?
Well, I have a drive because I feel that I watched my father when I was very young, and he was an alcoholic, and he used to go to take me to church but end up in the pub, and so often I had to be taken home by someone else because he got too drunk to take me home.
Okay.
But I thank God I had a praying mother who always prayed for us, and she always was there to help us, and she was there 24/7, and she's 76 and she's still there. So I think family life is so important, and so we try to go out there, and we know that some of those young people don't have anyone to talk to. There isn't anyone there for them. And so as we go out and we walk around the streets, they come up to us and they say, what's this all about? And they want to know more, and we spend time. We don't mind sitting down talking to them. And sometimes in the pubs they drag us over and say, come and sit down, tell us, what's it all about?
Do you think people genuinely are searching today?
I do, yeah. I think this is a key time for people to reach out, because people are beginning to get worried about their children growing up and going out. There are people normally with children of 10 to 13, and they say in a few years this is going to be our kids out there. What are we going to do? Do we leave the country? Do we go somewhere else? And I think we need to, as a nation, to pray for the children, the young people. And I think this is a desperate need, that young people are really, thought about and not forgotten in this time of their greatest need, when God's been taken out of the schools, out of the homes mainly.
Yes.
And only last week I heard of a young chap who his mother had sent a taxi to the special school he went to say, take him to the social services, I've had enough. So people are washing their hands off their children, and it's so sad, and he's just 16. So
family life's fragmented.
It is, absolutely, and the need is getting greater. And so I would say to the church, you need to get out there and just see what you can do.
What support do you have, and how do you fund yourself?
Well, we mainly find that God has provided everything I've ever needed. God has provided, and so when we need to get out or to do something, then it doesn't cost much to go out on the street and try and reach people and be there and talk to them, and to understand the times they live in is not like maybe the times I lived in the late 60s when I was a teenager. It's a lot worse now, and so it's a case of just going to God daily for our needs, and then going out in faith and saying, okay, if I can just reach one young person out on that street tonight, it's worth going out. And so we have a constant push and a need, and it's the same with Simon. He's got the same, he goes out around where he lives.
Simon works with you on the project.
Yes, he does, and he set up the underground church in Bristol so that we can reach people that are of no churches, that are out there and they need somewhere to sort of get in touch with. So we're there, and hopefully we're setting up in College Green, Bristol, very soon, a sort of an outreach on Saturday afternoons to reach the young people. They're on skateboards, smoking drugs and whatever, but we're going to go down there for about a year, and we're going to sort of walk around the town and just talk to them, be there for them.
I only met you just over an hour ago, and you strike me as a very genteel lady, and not looking at you with no disrespect, I wouldn't think that you would do this sort of thing. So I'm suspecting that some of our listeners are listening today and thinking, well, okay, Bridget must be this stout woman who goes out there and she's a bit of a Rottweiler.
Yes.
You're not like that at all. What would you say to people today who are listening, who are saying, I think God is prompting me to do this, but I am so scared I daren't?
I'd say put your trust in God and go out and do it. You got to have faith, and to know that what God is saying to you, that He'll help you through it, whatever it is. And so when you go out in faith, like Joshua went into the promised land, he just done it. God said go and do it, and he done it. And so if you become a Joshua, then you can go out and get into the promised land, and you can sort of do what God's telling you, and he will provide everything. He's providing everything for me, and for Simon he provides everything. And so I think it's just trusting God and getting on with it, because there is a lot to be done in these days. You know, these times are getting tough, and people are beginning to feel, and they don't know what to do. They have a good holiday, and even things go wrong, as we can see in holidays. And so they're trying to find ways to comfort themselves through these days, these tough times that are coming, and their children are out drinking, and they're desperate. You know, they're really desperate. But what I say is, you know, get into a church, start doing the work, start reaching out, and above all, pray, shake the gates of heaven for these children. Sister. Really shake the gates of heaven for them in prayer. Because, you know, if you've got a child yourself, you can feel the need. Even if you haven't, you can see it. So if we shake the gates of heaven, God's going to answer, and we're going to see changes. And we're expecting to see changes in Bristol, as we have really gone out in faith that God is going to do something, and we're going to keep on hanging on in there, and we're going to keep on praying, and we're going to keep on meeting those young children until we see a breakthrough.
It's fighting talk, isn't it?
Yes.
Fighting talk for Jesus.
Absolutely, yeah, because God's on our side. You know, who can be against us? And God said no weapon forged against us will prosper, you know, and every tongue that sets itself up against us in judgment we shall condemn.
Yes.
So we have the armour of God. We can go out there, and we can keep on fighting the good fight.
Now yourself, just before we close, yourself and your colleague Simon, who works alongside you, you both have stories to tell. How important is it for us as Christians to recognise that we have a story to tell, and our personal story of triumph, of overcoming, which is wrapped up in that bigger story of God's creation itself. How important is it for us to be open, be vulnerable, and tell our story? How important
It's absolutely very important for other people to release them. You know, Simon has been Cambridge educated. I've come from a very poor and alcohol background in Ireland, and together we managed to work together, and we meet all kinds, and so we try to help as many as possible. And so there is a great need for people to be able to speak out what's happened to them. You know, we've had to be quiet long enough, and now it's time to talk. And I think at every opportunity I always tell people, you know, I'm very upfront about my life and what happened to me. And there's much more. You know, I'm going to write a book, I hope, in the future.
You have written one, haven't you?
A little one, for the homeless, which is called Tiny Feet, which I hope, you know, will help them on the street. And I've written some street poetry to go with it.
Have you?
And Simon's helped me to put it together, because I'm pretty good at writing bits and pieces, but not very good at coordinating. So I've done that for the homeless, and I'm hoping to try and get it into Asheville Prison as well, where there's young offenders.
Excellent.
And to try and reach as many people as I can, the young people, to see if they can be rooted up or something, just to get their conscience going, to make them think again for themselves. So hopefully I'll be able to get that out. And
it seems to me that you're not putting a limit on what you can achieve as you go out there and you spread the good news of Jesus. You're not limiting yourself at all, are you? You're quite a toughie, aren't you, Bridget?
Well, God said that, you know, without a vision, God's people perish. So I have got a vision, and I'm hoping to push it through and write this book, and hopefully do more for the young, to get them before they're on the street, you know, to do something to try and awaken them before they get to that stage. So I feel like I have to get in there, and I just have to, you know, get the message over as much as I can, because I feel I'm doing something. You know, when I was young and I looked up at my father and he was hopelessly drunk, then I thought, you know, I can't help him. I know I can't, but one day I'm going to do something. So I've got fire in me to help the young people.
Well, sadly our time has come to a close, and my very special guest today has been Bridget White, and I think that you should be inspired by what Bridget has shared. Is there a final word you want to share with us today, Bridget?
Well, final word is that family life needs to stick together. Church people need to stick together. Jesus said love will never fail. Love never fails. Everything else may, but love never fails. So get together, pray for the young people, and shake the gates of heaven for them.
Wow. Now we're going to play out right now with a song which is very apt. It's Where's King, and it's called Life is Precious, and you did believe that. But I just want to pray with you, Bridget, before you leave me today. Lord, I just thank you so much for Bridget and her colleague Simon, and for everyone who goes out there on the streets of Bristol or wherever and proclaims your saving grace. I want to pray protection on Bridget and all those who work with her. And Lord, may 2007 be their Jubilee year. May they see many people come into the kingdom. Bridget White, thank you very much for joining me today on the Late Lunch. My apologies that Ruth wasn't with you today, but I hope that you felt comfortable with me.
Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.